Welcome, everybody, to the first session of the summer semester of SunoikisisDC Digital Classics 2024. Um, Today, we will start with our very first session on free and open primary text. But before doing that and welcoming our two speakers and co-organizers of this semester, Monica Berti from the University of Leipzig and Gabriel Bodard from the University of London, it would be perhaps beneficial to go through the syllabus of this semester, which has something new, let's say, in comparison to the other semesters of the very many years that Sunoikis has been running. That is, we also have this year some Byzantine studies, and the title of this semester is, in fact, Digital Classics and Byzantine Studies. Before we do that, if you are following the live broadcast on YouTube, please say hi in the live chat box. And first and foremost, if you are a student of the of the University of Cologne following my seminar this year. Let me share my screen and I will show you a bit what we're going to do this semester. So as you can see, the semester has 11 sessions and will go through until the end of June. We are going to talk about text, way of prepping and working on text, and for example, this very session and the session that Chiara and Megan are going to teach next week on text and translation alignment, but also handwritten text recognition and something more on the historical, let's say, side of the Byzantine studies, talking about digital prosopography with our colleagues from Vienna. Further, we will have our friends and colleagues from Hamburg talking about the very interesting Etymologica project, where they will present they represent the efforts on their digital edition of the Etymologicum Gudianum. And further going into more detail as far as the texts are concerned, we will talk tree banking and morphosyntactic annotation with Gabriel Bodard and Maria Vieros, but also once again on let's say, leaving a bit the philology aside and going a bit more into the, let's say, text bearing object and history. We will have our two last sessions on sigillographic data and also Arabic and Georgian and some Syriac sources for Byzantine and medieval history. So as you can see, it is going to be very, very interesting, very challenging. And we look very much forward to do this all together. Having said that, I think that I will leave the floor to Monica. And she will talk. Wait, I'm still getting used to StreamYard, so please bear with me. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Monica will talk about we'll start talking about free and open primary texts. And please, Monica, the floor is yours.
Okay, so Martina, thank you very much also for this introduction, and I take this opportunity also to say hi to your students. I'm very happy to see in our chat in YouTube many people joining today. So welcome to Sunoikis' Digital Classics. And as Martina said, so we have this semester mainly about Byzantine studies, which is a new thing for Sunoikis, and so Gabriel, Bodard, and I are very excited about that. So welcome to this. And this first session was meant to be an introductory session to free and open primary text, because of course one topic that we have been discussing a lot in Sunoikis' digital classes is accessibility. And today we will focus on text, not on other let's say objects. Of course, we have many sessions, we had many sessions, and we will have other sessions also about objects like inscriptions, papyri, and also archaeological monuments. But today we would like to focus mainly on primary text, primary sources. And so in this session we will present some of the main resources that we have today for accessing ancient Greek and Latin sources. And through the sessions, we will be able to mention different resources. And as Martina mentioned before, you have also the class outline in GitHub. You can always follow the structure of this session, and you have links in GitHub. So and of course, you also have our slides for following what we are presenting, and also if you want to check these resources, if you can't keep everything in any case in the class outline, you find links and then you will have our slides. And so I will start free and open primary text. Of course, again, so primary text, primary sources, this is not about bibliography, but of course, when we study the past, we look for ancient sources, primary text. And free and open, we have been talking a lot in the past, and we still talk and discuss a lot in Sunoikis about, as I said, accessibility. And open access, as you know, is a very important topic in our discussions in general in many different fields, including scholarship, including also the humanities. And free and open are two, I think, complex adjectives. Of course, we want to access these resources for free, but this is not the only issue. I mean, free is one thing, but open is not just free. So open means many different things, and especially to the problem of accessing structured resources, because we can have free resources, but in the end not so useful. Of course, we can access them for free. We can browse them. For example, we can read resources online and primary text online, but then in the end, if we want to use them, well, we have to work a bit with them, because they are not so usable in terms of computational techniques and digital techniques. So, but anyway, we will discuss during this session about free and open. In any case, I will start after this introduction. So I will start for this first part of this session by mentioning resources that are definitely free and open, in the sense that you can access them for free. You don't have to access them through a subscription. Of course, there are other resources that you have to access by paying a fee, or maybe you can access them if you are in the network of your university or your academic institution or any other institutions like a library. But still, remember that there are resources that you can access because you are in a certain network, but then your institution is paying, let's say, a subscription. Now I'm mentioning these three resources: Perseus, Open Greek and Latin, and Scaife, and I will describe these three resources, and they are free. You can access them without a subscription first, but they are open also, not only because they are free, but also because they offer structured primary text, and I will explain what I mean by that. And first, so let's start with Perseus. In this slide, I refer specifically to the Perseus catalog, which is, as the name says, the catalog of the Perseus project. The Perseus project was born many years ago now, in the 80s of last century, we have to say, when, of course, and this project was one of the first projects in this field to digitize sources. And originally, the Perseus project was, let's say, a multimedia project offering different resources together, like primary text, but including also dictionaries, handbooks, images, maps for the ancient world. And in the 80s was really something new, so a multimedia environment, something that today in general we use. So every day we use a multimedia resource, but at the time it was really completely a new project, I mean, with new ideas. Today, the Perseus project is focused a lot on offering open structured text for ancient Greek and Latin, but not only, because you can find also other resources in Arabic, Farsi. Of course, the most important part of this collection is still represented by ancient Greek and Latin sources. And of course, a fundamental component of the Perseus project is also the Perseus catalog, which started not in the 80s, but later. And this is an interesting thing. Of course, a catalog is always fundamental when you begin to collect primary text of a specific language or of a civilization, of a literature. And considering various technologies, the Perseus catalog started in more than 10 years ago, using different technologies. And you can see here the main page of the Perseus catalog. You can access it. You can browse it, as you see, by author, work title, language, etc., also by edition. And there are also pages in these resources where you find descriptions of not only of the history of this catalog, but also how authors and works are represented in the catalog, are cited. Today we don't have the time to describe all these things, but you can access it through this interface. And the important thing is that the Perseus catalog wants to offer access to open editions for ancient Greek and Latin. So in the Perseus catalog, you will find basically links and metadata to text that are available in the Perseus digital library. But you will also find links to other editions available in other resources, editions that are out of copyright, because this is another important component. So when we say open, we mean maybe free, but also structured, but we also refer to text and editions that are not protected by copyright restrictions, which is another important aspect of accessibility and open access. And the Perseus catalog is ingesting metadata from many different external resources, in particular national and international library systems, and the Perseus catalog ingests this kind of data. So you will find, this is why you can find the links not only to the Perseus digital library, but also to other resources. And I can briefly show, okay, if I go through to the Perseus catalog, we can search an author. This is a very simple search, but and again, here we are visualizing the interface. Of course, behind there are repositories, and the Perseus catalog is also accessible in a structured format, and I'm going to show that. An example, if we look for the ancient Greek historian Thucydides, we find in the Perseus catalog entries, an entry about the author with metadata about the author, and by metadata in this case I mean identifiers of the Perseus catalog, but also of other reference resources for classics, where you have specific numbers conventionally used to cite Thucydides, and then you can find a long list of other elements like names in different modern languages, not only in ancient Greek, and then metadata like the genre, and then links to many other resources. And then, of course, you can find the works. Below, works currently catalog. Of course, in this case, well, we have mainly the history of the Peloponnesian War, and then you can open the record, and under this work, the history of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, you will find a long list of different editions of this work. Open editions, so basically editions that today can be accessed because they are not protected by copyright, okay? And this is, again, the web interface of the Perseus catalog, but the Perseus catalog is accessible through repositories, and in fact you can see here the page in GitHub of the Perseus Digital Library, which has a collection of repositories in GitHub, including the catalog, but not only the catalog, also the text. And in fact, as you can see here, I can access to the catalog data. So here you will find you can access the catalog. So you can search the catalog through the web interface. But here you have different files where the information that you have in the website of the Perseus catalog is accessible here, and you have a main folder for authors. So, and basically you can find here, if we go through, in this case, names in Latin are used, and for example, we can jump to Thucydides, and here we have access to a structure resource. So this is an XML file where you have all the metadata that you can see in the web site of the Perseus catalog. And here, all the information that I was showing before is accessible in a structured format. So you can use this data, for example, if we want to search the entire catalog, and these resources, so these files, these XML files in a MADS format, which is one of the formats used by library systems, is accessible. Okay, so this is an example of a free but an open resource. Open in the sense not because it is free, but because you can download data, so you don't have just to read the Perseus catalog through the web resource, but you can download this data and you can use this data for many different possible researches and needs you have. And this is one thing for authors, but then you also have another folder here, a repository. As you can see, there are different repository, as for now, for Greek and Latin, also Arabic. And within the Greek, given that we are talking about Thucydides, within the Greek folder, you can find, again, structure files with metadata about the editions that I was showing before. And by metadata, I mean information about works, not the text. For example, if we were talking about Thucydides, which is number 3, okay, we can access and here are used numbers of the TLG because they are reference numbers in the community, and 003 is the number for Thucydides, as you can see here in the Perseus catalog. And here you can access catalog metadata, not the works. Okay, but if you go back to the main repository of the Perseus DL, you can also have the collections of text. Canonical Greek Lit is the folder where you will find the actual text. And in fact, if I want to open, sorry, I'm going a bit fast, but now I should be able to open, okay, the folder where you have XML files with the entire text of the history of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides in different editions. And as you can see, not only in different editions for the ancient Greek, but also in different modern translations. As you can see, you can access XML files with the translations of Thucydides in English, in French, and in German, in Italian also, and you also have an XML file with, and I'm sorry, it's very... okay, here it is, and you have here, of course, is not easy to read a file like this, but this is an XML file with the text in ancient Greek of the Peloponnesian War. So this is an example of a structured text, because this text is presented in XML, where you can you have basically a structure with books and chapters of this work and other elements that are marked up. So this is an example of an open resource. Okay, again, in this case, of course, you can use a file like this, not just to read the text of Thucydides, because there are other tools for this goal, as I'm going to show you, but this is an example of a structured text that can be used for queries and for other searches that you may need. So this is the Perseus catalog. Going back to the slides, I was talking about the Perseus catalog and the resources in the Perseus Digital Library. Okay, so accessing the catalog, metadata about authors and works, and primary text about sources. A project related to this is the Open Greek and Latin project, which is a project started at Leipzig University as part, in any case, of the Perseus project. And the Open Greek and Latin, as you can see also from the name, the idea was in recent years to add more text to Perseus, but not only the reconstruct the text, so maybe primary text, but digitize entire editions, including also the critical apparatus and other elements. You have here links to the Open Greek and Latin. I don't have to show you, in this case, this resource, because there is another repository and the principle is the same. So to offer more editions than in the Perseus project in a structured format. Basically, you find XML files of this primary text for ancient Greek and Latin authors, and in any case, links to these texts are also available in the Perseus catalog. And the Open Greek and Latin, even if since the beginning, okay, the Perseus catalog started to collect open editions, one of the efforts of the Open Greek and Latin when it started about 10 years ago was to discuss problems concerning accessibility, not only in terms of structuring files and structure text, but accessibility also in terms, for example, of copyright issues and new licenses that today are available for accessing resources, including primary text for the ancient world, and also for publishing a new text in ancient Greek and Latin, I mean new editions using licensing. But today we can't talk about that. In any case, you have the link to the Open Greek and Latin project. There is a repository. You can also find an interesting link here where you have a description about the Open Greek and Latin project, and in the readings that you find in the GitHub outline for the class of today, you find a paper about this project. But then I will move to the last resource that I wanted to mention, which is the Scaife viewer. So I said the catalog, the first effort is to create the catalog to collect information about ancient authors and works. First, so metadata describing these authors, like the name, the chronology, and editions. Then the second element is connected to the catalog, is the collection of primary text, so basically the works of ancient authors. And we have seen these structure files that can be downloaded and used, but of course you will never read a text in an XML file. I mean, this is a format not meant for reading, but for searching it, and then you can use you can access the entire collection of Perseus to search through many texts. If you want to enjoy reading, as part of the first project and of the Open Greek and Latin, there is a reading environment, which is the so-called SCAFE viewer. The SCAFE viewer is named SCAFE in memory of Ross Scaife, a pioneer of digital classics, who unfortunately passed away now more than 10 years ago, but he was really a pioneer. About 15, 20 years ago, he contributed to the field that we now call digital classics, and this is why the SCAFE viewer is named in memory of Ross Scaife. And today, the SCAFE viewer is a reading environment, by which we mean, and I can access it through the link. The idea is to offer a resource where you can read the text, and if you look at Thucydides again, we can access, as you can see, the text that we were seeing before. So through the SCAFE viewer, you will see a collection. For example, Thucydides is now available in different editions in the Perseus catalog and in the Perseus project, and so you can decide if you want to read the text in ancient Greek or in a translation, and we can start by choosing the Greek, and within this resource you can read the text going through the chapters, and around you also have other tools, for example, for searching words, for getting the morphology of each Greek word, and you can also access we are in Germany now, so we can, for example, access and align, on the right, the German translation of the text of Thucydides. The SCAFE viewer is a live project because it's adding constantly new text and new resources. Again, so this is an example of a free and open reading environment. Free because, again, you don't have a subscription. Open in the sense that this is a reading environment, so meant to be used as reading pages. You read the text, but with tools. Today we don't have the time, and this is not the focus to mention these resources, but you can search the text, and you can also for example, you can access a word list. You can also get more information about the morphology for each word, and there are other sister projects of the SCAFE viewer for producing reading environments. Okay, so this is what I wanted to mention in this first part, and then of course time runs fast. The last resource that I would like to mention, but we have time maybe to talk about that also later during the session, for Latin is also the Digital Latin Library, which is a more recent project, and the goal, as you can see, is to focus on Latin. The goal is similar to the Perseus project, so to provide free and open access to primary text for Latin. And the interesting thing is that the Digital Latin Library offers also a catalog again, and this is important. So in every period of time, also in the past, where you begin to see an effort to collect primary text of a certain language or a certain literature, you always find information about the catalog. This is the first moment to collect texts that represent a certain language or a certain civilization, a certain culture, and of course these texts have to be organized. Today we have digital technologies, and of course we have digital catalogs, but the principle is always the same: to collect, to organize these texts in a catalog where you of course add information, and then now we put them in repositories. In a library you put them on the shelves. In the past, when we had papyri, they were organized also physically in environments, etc. The mission is always the same, and in fact the Digital Latin Library is creating a catalog with identifiers and metadata. But I think that now we can move to the second part of this session, And I think that, okay, Gabby, the floor is yours. And okay.
Great, thank you. I should just share my screen, as I didn't do that in advance. Hang on. Sorry, we normally set this up in advance, so it's more cool.
Okay.
So Monica has just presented some very, very well structured sources of free and open texts that that include various catalog metadata and other information and open licensing attached to them. Now, if you want to do some of the sort of processing that we're going to be talking about this semester on ancient Greek and Latin texts or other kind of texts, then and the texts that you're interested in are in one of the collections that Monica's just told you about, then fantastic. That's the best text to use. They'll be the highest quality text because they've all certainly been checked. They're explicitly open licensed, and some of them have additional annotation associated with them. What I'm going to talk about is a slightly bigger picture. If the texts that you're interested in are possibly not in these detailed catalogs, where are some other places that you might look, that you might find some other texts? And then a bit later, I'm going to talk about what happens if you need to tidy up those texts a little bit before you can use them for one of the sorts of things we're talking about this semester. So, for example, we'll have a session on text alignment, where you might want to copy text into a piece of software. We'll have sessions on annotation, on morphosyntactic annotation and tree banking, on text analysis. I'm using various tools. So if you want to copy your text into one of those tools, you may need to tidy it up a little bit before you can use it. And so I'm going to show a few other sources of text, and then a bit later we'll talk about one of the ways in which you might tidy those texts up. I've just put up the page for the current session, the Sunoikis session on GitHub that Martina showed us earlier, just to point out that at the bottom of this, a list of resources contains most, if not all, of the resources that both Monica and I have talked about so far. I noticed that we haven't yet added to that list the papyrological and epigraphic resources that Martina is going to talk about, but we'll add those very shortly. You'll also see that the exercise at the bottom is currently blank. If you come back to this in an hour, there'll be something there. But so most of these resources are there in the thing. There are also screenshots in the slides which you'll be able to download shortly after this session as well. The first set of resources I'm going to talk about are the wiki source pages. These are sources of out of copyright texts that have been made available alongside the Wikimedia collection of projects, including Wikipedia, as with Wikipedia and various of these other resources in this family, the Wikisource sites are available in various languages, and that includes Latin. So you can see on this page, this is Wikifonts, the Latin for Wikisource, and it includes Latin texts of various authors not all of these will be classical Latin. It will include medieval Latin. It also include Neo-Latin, but these are resources that are open text, that are freely available and have been digitized and made available through the Wikisource project. So there will be lots and lots of texts in here that you won't find in many of these other places that we're talking about. They won't all necessarily be the highest quality texts, but they're all free. So that's one set of texts. There's also a Greek Wikithiki, the Greek wiki source, which there isn't specifically an ancient Greek wiki source, but the Greek wiki source includes ancient Greek texts. And I believe that I'm on the page for ancient sources within the Greek wiki source, and this then will also include various ancient authors in ancient Greek, or also some possibly not ancient authors written in ancient Greek. So worth poking around in, seeing what's in there. Again, lots and lots of texts, many texts that you're not going to find in Perseus because they're out of scope there. So if what you're looking for is not in there, this is another place you might look. And the texts in these places are mostly pretty good. So this is just worth noting. I mean, by pretty good, I don't mean good necessarily in a philological sense, but the pages are relatively clean. So they don't have all sorts of weird OCR artifacts in them, which is not true of everything. So this is a relatively clean view. It's probably an old edition because it's out of copyright, but nevertheless, it's fairly clean. And if you wanted to do, text analysis on, I mean, you'll find Aeschylus, Agamemnon in Perseus, but if it's something that you don't find in Perseus, this is a relatively clean text for you to work from in there. Less likely to be clean are the set of texts that are identified as being in Latin in Project Gutenberg. That includes all sorts of translated Latin, but also Neo-Latin, various other sources, but also, yes, also includes text of Cicero, both. Quite a lot of those, despite this being the Latin language subsection of Project Gutenberg, it does seem to include quite a lot of English translations of things. So it's the metadata in this is not always as clear as we would like it, but you may well be able to find things. I mean, again, I'm looking at Cicero, which is obviously in Perseus, but if there's other things that are not, you may find them in here. Project Gutenberg also has a page of texts that it claims are in ancient Greek, and some of these may probably are. Some of them may have got in accidentally, but that's nevertheless a potentially useful source. Project Gutenberg has millions and millions of free texts that have been digitized in many different languages. The small subsets that are in Latin and ancient Greek are relatively small. I don't mean to belittle the project as a whole. Another source of free text is the Hathi Trust, which has digitized many books for that are able to be made available for research purposes, some of which are able to be made completely freely available if they're definitely out of copyright, and a small subset of which are flagged as being in Latin. You may also be, there's not a flag for ancient Greek. You can probably do a flag for Greek, which will find you lots and lots and lots of modern Greek, and you may find some scattered ancient Greek in there. You can also search by author and by keywords and so forth. But among the Latin texts, you're going to find all sorts of strange and wonderful things that you won't find in any other catalogue of Latin. So that's worth having a look at. And the link that I've used for this in the SunoikisisDC session page is specifically a link to just openly available texts that are in Latin, that are identified as being in Latin. Another source of free text that you may have come across, or you may have thought of, is the ebooks collection in the Internet Archive. This also has a language flag, which enables you to tag texts by language and find a link of all their texts that they claim are Latin. You'll see from this page here, this screen here, that this tag is not entirely consistently used, as the volume of text analytics with Python is almost certainly not written in Latin, and some of these other texts don't appear to be in Latin. In some cases, they may be tagged as Latin because they're transcribed into the Latin script or something like that. But nevertheless, there'll be a bunch of stuff in here that is Latin, and even if in some cases it's the Latin nomenclature of anatomy, which is maybe not what we were expecting when we did this search, but it's technically correct, I guess. But But again, there's all sorts of things that have been digitized, possibly only as page images. So you may have to do some sort of OCR on it. Possibly the OCR might be quite crude, so it might need to be cleaned up, or it might be just available as PDFs. But in any case, there will be some of these things in here. If it's a text you're looking for and this is the only source of it, it's worth having a look and having a download of some of these texts. Worth also double checking what the rights are on these. There's no guarantee that these things are open licensed and available for use and for reuse and redistribution in all sorts of ways. So just because you can download it somewhere doesn't mean that it's also safe for you to re-upload it and do things with it later. But it's a starting place, and it's worth having a look. The last couple of things I'm going to talk about are a couple of slightly different resources than this. So one is a site called Lobolos, which is a collection of downloadable PDFs of those Latin text in these collections that you recognize as the green and red Loeb collections, that have fallen out of copyright and are therefore freely available, and they've been made available as PDFs. So the advantage of this, there's not likely to be very much in here that you can't find in any of these other places, but the advantage of this is that it has the English translation on facing pages. So if you wanted to do something with translation alignment, as you'll see next week, for example, this might be one source of text for you to copy and paste. And have a look at, but so there's lots and lots and lots of these that are out of copyright. Another source of text, which may include texts that you don't find elsewhere, is the Diorisis Ancient Greek corpus. Now, this is a linguistic corpus that has a lot of annotation inside it. There's all sorts of authors included in here, many of which are from Perseus, so they probably already exist. But these have been annotated in various ways, mostly morphological annotation done using machine learning, but they also have various other layers of annotation in them. And this might potentially be useful for you, especially as we'll talk about in a few weeks if you're doing some of the various kinds of annotation practice, but also if you're after a text, or if you're after a lemmatized text or something like this, and I'll talk a bit about this in a few minutes when I talk about regular expressions and cleaning up texts. It may be a useful source of text, but it will need some fairly severe cleaning up in order to be able to do anything with it in these in some of the methods we're talking about this semester. So just to sort of flag this as a really, really useful corpus, but it's not plain texts. So you'll have to do various things with it in order to use it. And the last thing that I want to mention just here is this project called LACE, which is it's an OCR project that does fairly well-trained optical character recognition on ancient Greek in particular, and as you know, or as you may know, or will learn in a few weeks if you don't already, OCR, in order to work, in order to be able to recognize printed characters from a page and turn them into digital characters, these need to be very, very, very significantly trained both in letter forms, but also in the kinds of words that are possible to appear, in all the different kinds of symbols that appear on these things. And the reason that OCR works really, really well in most modern languages is because billions of words have been OCR'd in English and other modern languages, and the training data that's been available for OCR tools is massive. For Greek and Latin, and Greek in particular, for ancient Greek, the OCR training that has been done is in a much smaller corpus, and it's not been done to that massive extent. So this is one of a small number of projects that has done quite a lot of training in Greek. And if you explore this site, you'll see a handful of the things that they've OCR'd most recently, and you'll be able to see the sorts of things that you can do with them. There's a layer for hand correction of the texts that have been OCR'd and so forth. And so this is something that you might want to look at if, for example, you've downloaded one of those PDFs from one of the pages we've given earlier, but it doesn't have any text in there, and you need the plain text in there somehow. Running that through one of these OCR projects will give you something that you can then do more work with. And I'm just going to finish by saying that it occurred to me that in the Digital Classicist Wiki, there is a page which is a summary of places where you can find Greek and Latin text in digital form. And I only thought to look at this page after we'd designed this session. And so there are a couple of resources in here which we haven't thought of mentioning in this session. So that might be useful. But there are also many things that we came up with and we mentioned in this session that are not on this wiki page. So it occurs to me that we need to have a wiki sprint to add some of our ideas from today into this page in the wiki. But it's worth having a look at in the meantime as a source of places where you can find such texts. Okay, so I think I'm handing over to Martina now. And I'll come back in a few minutes to talk about regular expressions.
Perfect. Thank you, Gabby. And yes, we should definitely have a sprint for the wiki. Many ideas came up today. So I will be very, very brief. And yeah, I will talk about some other primary text, some other sources that you might want to work with, even though they are, let's say, shorter text than Thucydides or Cicero, for example. But nonetheless, they are important. So we're talking about papyri, inscriptions, graffiti, seals, coins, so everything, so every text-bearing object that has been digitized, that has been digitally published, and that is, as per the title of the session, freely and openly available to use and reuse. Something that both Gabby and Monica have mentioned many times before is that, of course, one of the most important prerequisites for a text to be open and reusable is to give it an open license. And as for now, everything that I'm going to show you in the next couple of minutes has the Creative Commons, one of the many Creative Commons licenses. And I will show you in a second what this is. Everything that I'm going to show, I mean, this is by no means an exhaustive selection of what the world, let's say, of digital epigraphy and papyrology has to offer, but a couple of very important corpora from which you can then browse your way through the internet. And the common, let's say, the common feature of these corpora is that they are all in highly structured, reusable, and interoperable formats. That is, they are all in Epidoc XML. We're not going to talk about Epidoc at all in this session, but if you are curious or if you would like to learn more, please refer to the many sessions that we've had in the past semesters in SunoikisisDC Digital Classics, exactly on Epidoc and digital epigraphy. Wait, let me go to the next slide. Yeah, let's start with the papyri. And of course, our beloved papyri.info that many of you might know. And for those of you who do not know that, we will put the link in the useful resources that you have there. And as you can see there at the top of my slide, you can export the in this case the text in XML. And now I will share my screen. One second. Can you see my screen, right? Yeah. So this is the page that that I was showing before in the slide. And I mean, we're not here to talk about the structure of an edition of papyri.info, but Monica has already talked about, let's say, the difference between text and metadata. And here too, you can export in a structured and reusable format, both text and metadata. I will show you a very, just a random papyrus and its Epidoc edition. Of course, if you would like to use this text as a plain text, it is not, it needs some cleanup, let's say, and Gabby is going to show how to do this in a moment. But you can also export the metadata in XML and also in other formats such as RDF, JSON, and so on and so forth. So this is how you export these kind of sources. But we've been talking about reusing, remixing, repurposing sources, and this is possible because of this license that we've been talking already about. This is the Creative Commons attribution license that allows you to reuse and remix and repurpose everything that is on this page, provided you give the correct citation. So you give the correct source of what you've been doing. Further, we have inscriptions. And thanks to Epidoc, and also I have to say thanks to FS, Epidoc front-end services, and also on this, please refer to the many sessions on FS that we have done in the past semester in Sunoikisis. Thanks to these two very powerful tools, we have now a flourishing production of epigraphic corpora online. And we are still very much talking about Greco-Roman epigraphy on stone, but the scope is getting broader. Here too, as you can see, you can, and wait, I will share my screen once again. Here you can not only, in this case, I'm just taking a random, you can not only download the full Epidoc XML that you can reuse and repurpose in your corpora, but also, and this is something that also Monica already showed for the Perseus project, you can access the GitHub repository, and you can access the entirety of the files that make up this corpus. And as you can see on the screen, and in this case too, the work is licensed under a quite restrictive Creative Commons license, but still this doesn't mean that you shouldn't reuse this this incredible work, provided that you share it as is, so share alike. yeah, this is just to show you that this very same inscription is also in the epigraphic database Heidelberg, and there too you can export the full epidoc XML. A very interesting overview about the data reuse in epigraphic corpora, but not only, is to be found in the iSicily project and in the bit regarding the open data, and I will leave you the links so that you can browse it later on, where you can get a pretty good overview on what to do with open and freely usable and reusable epigraphic data. In this case, of course, we're talking about the epigraphic data produced by the iSicily project, but the same pretty much applies to every corpus with a Creative Commons by license. A very quick overview regarding also to other kind of sources, coins and seals, that even though they're quite small, they can have a whole lot of text on them. So once again, here the examples are, they're not exhaustive, but yeah, there's way less material, let's say, available online in comparison to the Greco-Roman epigraphy. So there is this very, very interesting project in Oxford regarding the Roman provincial coinage, where there is a very long list of epidoc files which have been produced manually, but aided by the artificial intelligence. You can browse through the files and reuse them according to their license. And also there is right now a provisional version, but there will be later this year the definitive version of the SigiDoc corpora. And also in that case, everything will be, Byzantine seals. Sorry, I gave it for already known. I'm sorry, but also in that case, please refer to the session that we had on sigillography and numismatics a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Also in this case, there will be the possibility of accessing and reusing all files and XML files and images, both of single, let's say, specimen, but also of the whole corpus, which consists of thousands and thousands of seals. So having said that, we are still talking about very raw XML files that you might want to reuse in some very specific cases, but you cannot perform very much of the processes that we're going to talk about in this semester. So having said that, I will hand over to Gabby, because if we want these files to be really reusable, we might want to clean them up a bit. So Gabby.
Yeah, thanks, Martina. One thing I'll just add to that actually is that one thing that that we're doing this semester, that you can reuse epidoc and sigidoc files for specifically is when we talk about tree banking in a few weeks, because there is a tool that specifically imports epidoc files into a tree banking environment, specifically with a view to also being able to incorporate textual corrections and textual variants into those tree banks. So that's again something. So just a sort of flagging forwards that we'll talk about more in a few weeks' time. But so if I can shift to my screen, yes. So going back to Wikifonts for a moment. If you find a text that you're looking for in Wikifonts, say you want Apuleius' Apologia, his defense against the charge of magic, you'll find it on here, and you might want to copy and paste this text and perform your text analysis or whatever on it. But one thing that you'll want to get rid of various parts of this text, various artifacts of the edition that aren't part of the text. Every chapter of this contains the numbers 1 through at least 12 anyway, and sometimes more, or sometimes less, multiple times. So if you're doing, for example, a word frequency analysis, you'll find that 1 turns up probably more often than almost any other word other than et. Right. So all sorts of things are going to mess up with your processing and analysis in this. So it's probably not too hard to imagine that this is able to be cleaned up, but with large amounts of text, and especially with more complex things that might find their way into the text, regular expressions are a way that will really help you to clean this up. So I'm not going to give a full tutorial into regular expressions right now. If you want a tutorial on this, for example, there's one on Programming Historian, but there's also, if you search for regular expressions tutorial, you'll find 100 of them. So pick your favorite. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly show this cheat sheet and explain a couple of the main features of regular expressions, and then I'll also show you in practice a couple of one very simple thing and then one much more complicated thing that I don't expect you to understand unless you go through and do a tutorial somewhere on your own and then come back to it, just to show the value and the power of regular expressions for cleaning up texts in various ways. So for this demonstration, I'm going to use a piece of software called Sublime Text, just for because it has good regular expressions handling. Many text editing tools will have that sort of functionality, but quite probably the free one that comes with your computer maybe doesn't. So just in case, you might want to go and look for something like Atom, Sublime Text, Visual Studio Code. These are all tools that are either free or will come with a free trial period, and you can play around with for a little while as you go. And basically, it's just when you find and replace, it allows you to put slightly more complicated expressions than just the string of characters you're looking for. Okay, so this cheat sheet, which is just a reminder, once you sort of understand the principle, this is a reminder of the main syntax of regular expressions, contains all sorts of useful things that you might want in there. But all the important things that I'm going to talk about are really at the top, this top part of the page up here. And I'm really just going to talk about three things very quickly. The first is the dot. When you have regular expressions turned on, the full stop or period character doesn't match a full stop or period in your text. Rather, it matches any character, right? Any character except for a new line. So it searches just within each line. It searches for that, any one character. So if, for example, you want to search for any word that has A and then any character and then B, you can type A.B and it'll find you that string. So it'll find you AAB, ABB, ACB, ADB, A7B, A exclamation point B, etc. Any such string. Okay, so that's the first and most important thing. You can search for any character and match any character rather than just matching specific characters. The second thing I want to talk about is this concept of the group. So if you put parentheses around the thing you're searching for, and that can include dots and it can include all sorts of other expressions as well, then that groups those things together and it allows you to remember them and to use them in the replace text. So if you want to search for a very particular string of characters, but only in a particular context, but then you want to keep those characters but not their context, this is a useful way to group together, and I'll show you an example of that. And you don't need to try and visualize it from what I've just said, but just to remember, when you're grouping characters together, you can use the parentheses to group them, and then when you're replacing later, you can call that character back with a special string which you start with. I don't know if replacement string here, which starts with the $sign followed by the number of which group in your text you're talking about. And if you've only made one group, then you just say $1, and that gives you the thing that you had in parentheses. It gives you it back in your replacement command. Lots and lots of other things in here, but the only other thing I'm going to talk about now are quantifiers, and that's up here. And the useful quantifiers, the most useful quantifier is the asterisk, and this means find this character either any number of times, including 0. Okay, so find it whether or not this character is here, but also if this character is here many, many times. And this doesn't necessarily have to refer to a single character. You can say a asterisk, meaning find me any number of A's, including none. In this context, but you can also say dot asterisk, and that's if you find any character and any number of times, right? And it's the any part that is repeated. So it doesn't just find multiple A's, multiple B's, multiple C's, but it will find any combinations of characters any number of times as well. And this becomes useful in combination with other patterns. The plus is very similar, but this character has to appear at least once in order for it to be found. It can't appear 0 times. And the question mark says, find me this character either present or not, but not repeated. So it's, in other words, it's find it me 0 or 1 time. So if I say ABC question mark, it'll find both AB and ABC. Okay. And AB, even if there's something else after it that is not a C. The final thing, which again is going to be really hard to explain, but I'll demonstrate it with an example in a minute, is if you add a question mark after one of these 3 quantifiers, it makes that quantifier ungreedy. That is to say, it will match the smallest possible result it can find that matches your query. Normally, it matches the largest possible result that it can find that matches your query. So if you say find me a asterisk, it'll find all the A's, including repeated A's, throughout the text. Whereas if it was ungreedy, it would find the first time it matches it would be the first time it hits anything at all that's not an A, right? And because it's found 0 A's. So it's only interested in finding the largest possible groups. But if you add a question mark, it then finds the smallest possible result to that. And that again is very useful when you do it in combination with other things. If you want to find something up to, between a set of brackets or of quotation marks, for example. And that's one that I'm going to use in my first example. So I just wanted to talk about those 3 concepts, which I understand that I've talked about them in a very abstract way, and they probably mean absolutely nothing at all to you until you see them in practice. But so let's get them in practice. So I'm going back to the Apuleius page in Wikifonts. And I've just copied the first 20 chapters, let's say, from there into a new blank text file. And there's all sorts of things in here that you don't necessarily want when you're searching for. Some of those things, it's quite easy to get rid of. This lot, up here, we can say, let's just delete that, right? You can just highlight it and delete it using the delete button on your keyboard. I'll leave it there for the moment, but it's very, you don't need to do anything clever to get rid of something that only appears once. But these numbers in parentheses that occur thousands of times across the file and at least hundreds of times across these first 20 chapters, you will need to, well, let me actually get rid of those. You'll need a regular expression to get rid of them all at once. So the regular expression for that, remembering that I've said that a parenthesis character has a special meaning, so I'm going to, in order to match a parenthesis, okay, and for this I've turned on regular expressions by clicking on this dot star symbol over here. In a different text editor, you may find it you have to turn on regular expressions in a different place. But so I'm going to, this matches a parenthesis. The backslash escapes a special character and means find me just that actual character. So a parenthesis normally defines a group, but in this case, I don't want to define a group. I want to match a parenthesis, so I use the backslash to match it. I then want to find whatever character inside those parentheses may be. So I could say dot star followed by another parenthesis. And I'll show you now the difference between greedy and non-greedy. So this is greedy, and when I find an opening parenthesis followed by any characters followed by closing parenthesis, it finds this entire passage, which has lots of other closing parentheses inside, but I haven't told it that that it shouldn't match closing parentheses inside. I've just said find me anything from an opening parenthesis to the closing parenthesis, and because it's being greedy, it's finding as much as it can. Okay, but as soon as I tell it to be non-greedy, it only finds the smallest possible result each time. Okay, so as soon as it's found one closing parenthesis, it stops looking. That's what the question mark does there. That's what non-greedy means. I hope that helps with that a little bit. So when I do this, I'm just wondering if, having found all of these, what if there's something in parentheses that is not a number? I don't know if there is in this text, but let's say there was. That's not in parentheses, that's in angle brackets. But let's say there was. We'd also be getting rid of those, and we may not want to. So if there were parentheses around some words, and I can't see any examples of it, but take my word for it that there might be, or let me say there's parentheses around these words here. And when I say, find that example, it will also find that. And if I want to just delete all of these numbers in parentheses, then I don't want to delete this ex verbis that's in parentheses. So in here, I'm going to change from dot star question mark to there's a special character which means just any digit, and that's \d. So now when I say find all, it finds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but not ex verbis. Okay, it would find double digits, because I've not said just find me one digit, but I've said find me any number of digits, including 0. I suppose I don't want it to find 0 digits, so maybe actually I'm going to put a plus in there. If we had opening and closing parentheses with nothing inside, I mean, yes, I probably would want to delete that, but just in case I didn't want to, let's get rid of that. So if we have opening closing parentheses with nothing going on there, that should now not be matched. Yes, that's not matched now by my query. So having made that query, I can now simply say find that and replace it with nothing. And then we've got rid of all those numbers from our text. We haven't got rid of these numbers here, which are at the beginning of each chapter, because they're not in parentheses. But you can say, let's just say now, let's just get rid of every digit character, and then they're all gone too. There are other things in there which I haven't showed you how to get rid of, like this weird series of underscores here. This is because this is text that is in Greek in the original, and the wiki fonts hasn't preserved the Greek, and so it's replaced it with underscore characters for some reason. You could try and come up with some regular expression to get rid of those. I'll leave that for you to play with if you really want to. But so that's the simple example. This is a simple regular expression, but I hope you've understood what's going on with that for cleaning up a text in a relatively straightforward way. And bear in mind that there are things which were not really in this text that I just put in for purposes of demonstration, and I don't know what happened to those parentheses. Maybe they did get deleted, since I now can't find them anywhere. But no, there. I would need to find them. There they are. Let me just get rid of those because they're not really supposed to be there. So we've cleaned this text up. This looks reasonably nice. I don't see anything else in there. We could use this in Voyant tools to do some text analysis or whatever. The next example I'm going to use is a bit more complex, and so I'm not going to expect you to understand everything in here, but I hope you'll see the value of doing this. So this is a bit of morphosyntactically analyzed and annotated text, Greek text from the Dionysus corpus. This is from the Alexander of Lucian, the false prophet. It's Alexander the false prophet, not Lucian the false prophet. And this is some fairly detailed XML. So we've got here a whole sentence made up of multiple words and so forth. So this is really no use to you. If you put this into something like Voyant tools, you would get the word sentence turning up a lot. You'd get the word turning up lots and lots and lots because it occurs twice in there. You get the word lemma turning up a lot, form, location, tree tagger, all these things turning up a lot. And your actual Greek words would be lost in this swamp of XML tags. And in fact, there's all sorts of things in here, pronoun, particle, which are really valuable in other contexts. But for our purposes, we don't necessarily want them. So the only reason that we might want to use this text from the Dionysus corpus rather than using a text from Perseus, for example, is that in addition to the form of the word that turns up in the text, which is this part here in the form attribute of the word, which is strangely given in beta code. So it's in Latin characters with accents represented by brackets and similar characters. These are the declined forms. Each word element in the corpus also contains a lemma, and the entry attribute gives you that in Unicode now, which is the form we want, of that word in the nominative singular or in the present active indicative if it's a verb or similar. It's the dictionary head word, in other words, it's a lemma. And if for some kinds of analysis you're really interested in finding the particular word, not just the particular form of the word, and its frequency in the text, then you might want just to keep this piece of information from your text. And in order to do that, let me again get rid of the excess metadata at the top. You will need to find this form attribute, this entry attribute and its content, and get rid of everything else. Right? You want to keep the content of this attribute and lose everything else. And so again, I'm going to show you the regular expression to do that, but I'm not going to expect you necessarily to understand everything, although it's all things that we have already talked about. So first, I want to find the rest of the line. Okay, so I find $? finds me any number of characters, but I'm being non-greedy because I wanted to stop as soon as it hits the thing I'm looking for. And then the thing I'm looking for is the word entry, that's the attribute name, equals, and then opening and closing parenthesis, quotation marks. And inside that, I'm declaring a group with parentheses. And that group can be any number of characters. So I'm going to do a non-greedy match everything in there. And then after that, I'm going to match everything else again. And remember that dot character won't cross lines. So it only does this within a line. So it finds me everything in the line up to entry equals, and then something in quotation marks. And it stops again as soon as it hits another quotation marks because it doesn't go up. We don't want it to pick up all of this up to the end of the line, right? and then close the group, find the quotation marks, find the rest of the line, ignore everything outside of those parentheses, right? So if I do the find, you'll see it's finding. Now, wait a minute. Maybe I want it to be greedy at the end of the line, don't I? Yes, there we go. So I'll ask it to be greedy up to the end of it. So it finds the entire line, but as well as finding that entire line, it is saving the bit in parentheses as a group. So I'm going to say replace that entire line with just the bit in the group. Okay. So if I find one and I replace it, it just keeps the word filter. So if I replace all of those elements and all of the other attributes on them have been replaced by just the lemma in there. Okay. And then I'm going to do another very simple query. I'm going to say find all strings of characters in angle brackets and replace them with nothing. So it should get rid of all the other elements. There you go. All the other elements are gone, and we're left just with all of the lemmatized forms of the words, the Greek words in this text. All the the nominative singulars, the perfect active, present active indicatives, etc. That we can do text analysis on and word frequency and so forth without having to worry about the fact that some of them are different forms and so forth. So this is just another example. Again, not something we necessarily need to be able to do, but the sorts of thing you can do with regular expressions once you've learned a little bit more about them. So I'll stop there, and we'll just say a few words about the exercise. Is that the easy version of the two that I showed you? If you can take a text, it doesn't have to be from Wikisource, but can be from somewhere else that's not quite the clean, perfect text-only text you want, and figure out enough regular expressions to clean that text up, even if it's just pulling out numbers in parentheses, but whatever else it is. So in order to do that, you'll want to learn a little bit more about regular expressions than you just got from me, just so you've got a little bit more familiarity with it. And again, this tutorial from Programming Historian or various other tutorials that you can find out there. There's a tutorial, I think, associated with the site that you get this from, but there's a couple of other tutorials linked in the Sunoikis page. So learn a little bit more about regular expressions and some of the things you can do with them, and try it out on some Greek or Latin texts. Martina, do you want to contextualize that further, make that exercise a bit more ambitious?
No, I think it's already quite interesting, but I mean, I think we will also give the more difficult one as an optional exercise, let's say. So if you're feeling brave, or if you want extra credit, you can definitely also do the something more challenging, just like Gabby just showed. I think, I mean, we don't have that much time for questions and discussion, but if people in the live chat have questions or remarks or clarifications to ask, please do so. We will be very happy to address them. And in the meantime, I will share my screen 1 second to announce the our next session, which will take place today in a week, so April 15 at the same time as the session of today, that is 5 p.m. German time, 4 p.m. London time, and we will talk about text and translation alignment with our colleagues Megan Bushnell from the University of London and Chiara Palladino from Furman University, and we will be able to to apply what we have been learning today, pretty much. What can we do with open free text that have been also a bit polished and tidied up. It doesn't seem the case. Doesn't seem that we have any questions, but please, Gabby.
While we're waiting for students to ask questions, can I pretend to be a student for a moment?
Oh yes, please.
and ask, how do I know if a given text in Greek and Latin is in copyright or if it's open licensed? And there's a bigger question to that, because until you started talking in this session about open licenses and the importance of open access and reusable and public domain text, I would assume that anything written in Greek or Latin 2,000 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago, was out of copyright automatically. So what's going on there? Can you help me?
Well,
That's a very big question.
Well, this is a big question. We could devote an entire session about that. So first, yes, of course, technically, authors of ancient Greek and Latin works died many years ago, but of course, copyright applies to editors of these texts. And so when we say copyright, we refer to the editions, printed editions. And where do we find this kind of information? This is the thing. You can find, there are many answers, in the sense that, and this is valid not only for text, but also for pictures. So if we start with easy things, for example, if you use many Wikimedia resources for text, for objects, for pictures, you can find this information. And for example, for Wikimedia, where you have images, you have references to licenses, etc. For other resources, then for text outside of Wikipedia, if we consider Antitrust, because Gabby mentioned Antitrust, for example, we can also mention Internet Archive, Google Books. There you have definitely information about copyright restrictions, and technically what is available should be out of copyright. There are also not fully open resources, for example, in Google Books, and then also in Internet Archive. In fact, you can log in and borrow text that are still protected by copyright, but technically, in fact, you can't download them. For other resources, also, if you want, for example, to digitize a text that you find in the library, there you have to consider the country where you are in, the library where you are working in, and check laws. Usually a text is out of copyright 70 years after death of the last editor of a text, and after that date you should be able to use a text, because or at least to reproduce and to reuse it, and maybe also to publish it. And this is, for example, what we have in Open Greek and Latin, begin to digitize text 70 years after the death of the last editor. Gabby, you have a question?
Just to note that's the 70 years after death, I believe, is the American rule, which is quite often used globally. In the EU, I believe it's not 70 years after the death; it's 100 years after publication.
Yes, this is
a different way of calculating it, and so it's slightly.
Well, yes. For example, in OGL for text, also in Germany, we use the 70 years after the death of the editor. Exactly, it's a bit tricky. And then another thing is about the critical apparatus. So in this is for students. So if you have ever used a critical edition where you have the text, and below in the same page, the so-called critical apparatus, that part is considered the intellectual contribution of the editor, and so there are other restrictions there. So you can use the reconstructed text, but not the critical apparatus. And today, for example, you can find digitized versions, PDFs, basically images, for example, in Germany, also in Dresden, in the library in Dresden, in the online collection, you can find images where the critical apparatus is covered, because is still protected by the copyright. And 25 years after the publication, then you are able to use also the critical apparatus. It's complex, of course.
It's also worth noting that some texts are made available, or images are made available via massive open access and open licensed sites such as the Wikimedia family of projects, Wikipedia and Wikisource and so forth, Wikimedia Commons, which contains images and so forth, which usually means that those images that they've checked and those images are legally available to be used. But it's worth checking their copyright statements, because it doesn't always. Wikipedia includes lots of images, for example, in their pages that are used under fair use or fair dealings, which means there are certain contexts in which it is legal to use images, especially if they're low resolution images for illustrative purposes. That doesn't mean that it's legal for other people to use them for other means. So just because you found an image on Wikipedia doesn't mean that that image is freely available for you. 90% of the time it does, 99% of the time it does, but in a few cases it doesn't. And the same applies to text. And it is a thorny rule. Generally speaking, compiling existing open access information into a new catalog doesn't accrue new copyright to it, because copyright is creative work. It's not just something that's really hard work. But in some jurisdictions it does. In some parts of Europe, for example, compiling a telephone directory gives you copyright over the content of that directory. In most of the world, it doesn't. Digitized, creating a new text of Euripides, because the text of Euripides is fully public domain and out of copyright, my new text of Euripides, however much I might have amended it, is also in the public domain, even if I claim that I've done new creative work to it, because I'm not making a new creative text, right? I'm claiming I'm reconstructing, using intelligence and learning the original ancient text. So that text cannot be under copyright. However, in some jurisdictions, that rule is interpreted slightly differently, and it might be. So you always have to find, an explicit indicator that this text is available for you to reuse. And there was one other thing I was going to note about reusing text. It's gone. It'll come back to me in a minute. Carry on.
Yes, we have a note in the chat. Sadly, sources like Loeb always. Yes. We are talking of different resources, of course. Editors, publishing companies, of course, they need subscriptions. So this is another big complex topic. So, and is the business model here? We're talking about the business model. Yes, Gabby.
That was the thing I was going to say, actually, is that the other reason that text might not be okay for you to reuse is nothing to do with copyright, but it may be to do with, specifically to do with license or contract. So if you have access to a text, the text itself may be out of copyright, but if you have access to the text under contract with somebody who has compiled a text and created a database of that contract, you may have implicitly agreed not to make that text available elsewhere. That's the case, for example, if you have a subscription, or if your institution has a subscription to the TLG, to the Thesaurus Linguae Graecae, those texts themselves are out of copyright. That's why the TLG was able to digitize them themselves. But from purely a copyright status, there'd be nothing stopping us from copying and pasting those texts and making them freely available elsewhere. It costs a lot to subscribe to the TLG. However, by accessing them via the TLG, we have agreed to a contract with them that we won't do that, and that contract is legally enforceable. So that's something completely unrelated to copyright, which stops us from reusing texts in some contexts, and that would be the case also with some of the Loeb classics, or with other things that you get through databases. That there's a contract that you've agreed you're not going to, copy and paste their content, essentially. And some places, a lot of places will have that sort of contract information. A few places will enforce it. So that's something else to be careful about.
Okay, so yes, thank you. I think that, well, our time is over, and I know we have students, so of course we could go on for many hours talking about these things, but Martina, I think we should
Yeah, but perhaps we should wrap it up. And a reminder once again that next week we will have a session on text and translation alignment, and hope to see many of you there too. So thank you, and see you next week. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye. 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 Good night.